You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on the Vets on Media Network.
Good morning, Arizona, and welcome to our listeners from around the world. This is Joe Brett.
And David Lucier.
And you're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour. We have a wonderful guest for you today. It's our mentor and our leader, Barbara Hatch. She's the founder of the Veterans Heritage Project, from which this show takes its name. And I want to start off anyway with a little discussion. And we had a program change today, and I think this leads us to a discussion. I think we've met the future of warfare. I think the technology and what's happening in the world have kind of collided here. We had a guest who was supposed to have called in from Kurdistan, and he thought better of it, and we agreed that this was not appropriate for him to be on this internet show. And we've also lost some other guests who were drone pilots passing through town, and they certainly didn't want to talk about, and they're back over there now, as a matter of fact. So there's my So my covert buddy here, David, is got his shades on. He's in sympathy with the people who are spooks in this world, who want to go undisclosed and unnamed and unseen.
Well, we have to be careful these days. When I spent a couple of years in Iraq as a contractor.
Yeah, you look it.
And it wasn't unusual for us to get a love letter from the local insurgents. Telling us about what they were going to do to us if they captured us. Sure. And why we shouldn't be there, and so they knew who we were. And several of my friends had been targeted and were assassinated. Several of the people who worked for us as laborers, for the most part, they used to recycle some of the materials that we used, and that's all they were doing. They were assassinated.
Oh wow.
And so it wasn't, people's homes were being burned down in Baghdad. We worked out in Anbar province. Sure. Near Ramadi and Fallujah. And we had people whose families were being kidnapped, tortured, assassinated. Their homes were being burned down. And that was just having an association with the Americans who were present. And so by extension, I think what we have here is a concern for participants on this particular show, particularly coming from, if they're coming from a very hostile environment.
Sure, and it's hostile, you'd have to say that.
Absolutely.
And it's not getting less hostile. So with all that said and done, we can now focus our attention on the Veterans Heritage Project and its founder, Barbara Hatch. Welcome to our show, Barbara.
Thank you.
So nice to see you. You had a busy weekend, as we all did, on Memorial Day. Where were you this weekend?
Well, I was in two places at once. That's the beauty of technology. My students were at the National Cemetery. Uh-huh. They made a wreath to present with the other wreaths from the different veteran groups. So they attended there, and I got to see the pictures of them standing with John McCain and all of that. And they represented us extremely well, so I was very proud of them. But I went back to where my fascination with veteran issues started, and that was out at Fountain Hills. Because back in whenever Saving Private Ryan was, 95, 96, students asked, was that real? And I said, I wrote a letter to the VFW, and I started to get calls from veterans. And Fountain Hills VFW 7507, they started a Veterans in the Classroom program and followed me for 20 years. So when we started Veterans Heritage Project with students interviewing veterans, that's where we started. So since Joe here was the keynote speaker out there on Monday.
Our own Joe Brett.
Our own Joe Brett. I decided to go out there and support and be with those veterans out there.
Because he needs all the help he can get.
Because I had to give him a few tips about being brief. Yes, be brief, Joe.
This was not an hour-long internet show.
No.
No, and Barbara was there. But I have to say, it was really an honor to have been invited, and it was an honor for me to have been there and to have, that's 15 minutes of veterans fame in a cause that I have been with all my life. I mean, loving veterans and talking to veterans. And then to speak on Memorial Day was truly an honor.
And on a serious note, I understand that you received a standing ovation after your presentation.
I was surprised. I did get a standing ovation, and people came up and actually said they liked it. So thank you, Barbara, for all the help getting me to that point in time.
Well, what I saw, which made me feel very good, there was a spectrum there. There were some of the veterans from our first book, a World War II Marine who was stationed in Philippines, Okinawa.
Mm-hmm.
And I still remember the stories he told us like they were yesterday.
Yeah.
He's getting a little wobbly, so I walked him to his car. But so good to see him, a Navy veteran, a couple Navy guys. Corpsman in Book One.
Yeah.
They're from Book One. So there aren't a lot of those left out there. So it was good to see the spectrum. There were some younger guys, some Vietnam guys, some guys I still want to interview, along with the students, which is the point.
Thank you, Barbara. That's the first time I've heard younger guys and Vietnam veteran used in the same sentence.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
There are quite a few out there we still need to interview. But what I want to comment about Joe is that I told him, tell a story. And I think the key for young people is to not lecture them or to tell them what to do, but just tell them a story. And Joe told a story yesterday. It's a little bit like Jesus, although, what can I say, Joe? He told a story about a guy that was shot down in 3 attempts to rescue that guy. And the first helicopter was shot down with all lives lost.
Nice.
And I think when you tell people a story, if you looked around at the red shirts in the audience out there, they understand, they get it, that Americans don't leave people behind. I think young people I want them to hear things about looking out for people to your right and left, because as a teacher of 40 years, you walk along and it's like everybody's head is in their phone. And I want them to look up and say, would you like a hand? Could I pull that chair out for you? What do you need? So I think that's a byproduct of this. And I like that Joe told that story. Thank you for telling that story.
True story.
I
I talked with Clovis. Clovis Jones was on this show, and Clovis, quite a hero, you'd have to say, for me. There's a kid from Georgia who wound up in the Battle of Adrang Valley that Joe Galloway made so famous, another guest on our show. But Clovis said there's a brotherhood. You've got no one else, and all you guys, Adam and everyone here, certainly David. But when you're in that situation, it's not God and country anymore. It's your buddy. I mean, the only guy who's going to save you is the guy next to you, and you become him and he becomes you, and you and that group you're with are the people who are going through the experience. You have no one else to rely upon. And so that brotherhood is everything. And I think, and Clovis and I were speaking, that the difficulty with people coming back to civilian life is that cohesion, that brotherhood is not there. It's difficult sometimes to trust civilians, if you will, who are in the business world, or, they don't have that same bond is not required to be in business here. And a matter of fact, it won't even harm you. But if you're a veteran, you rely so much, and you wouldn't lie to someone, you wouldn't misuse someone, you wouldn't, go out of your way to harm someone. And if you're, veterans just don't lie to one another, and they're always involved in something constructive. They're always involved for the greater good. As far as I can see, I see a lot of volunteerism. And so the code is different, and that's a difficult adjustment for a veteran to make.
Well, a good byproduct of that event was that one of the school board members from the Fountain Hills community was there. The veterans should not be stacking chairs, putting out chairs in extreme heat. I watched these World War II guys build this memorial, but every time I'm there on Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and I look out, the audience is older. It's all vets.
Sure.
Well, where are the teenagers? Where are the young people that are supposed to be there honoring the veterans, not just veterans patting themselves on the back? So hopefully, we will make some inroads out there and get the high school kids involved, because if you guys are talking about the future of warfare, these are the kids that are going to go off to serve in the future, and they need to be there listening, appreciating and being patriotic, but also those that are called to step up to serve should do that, or at least come and pick up chairs and serve in some other capacity.
And all your students do that?
Yes.
Well, this is, I think, maybe a good place to back up for our global audience and come back to a starting point as to what is the Veterans Heritage Project? What does it do? What makes it special? So why don't we back up and go to the basics here? And what is the Veterans Heritage Project?
Well, it sort of evolved because I love to hear veteran stories after meeting those guys from Fountain Hills and having them come to my history classes and talking to students about World War II or Korea or Vietnam. So it started there, but then when we formed it as an actual program, you know, you need a mission. That's what I know about military guys. You always have a mission. You focus on the mission. So the mission is to connect students with military veterans to pass the lessons of history on to future generations. Because I think I heard the millennials passed up somebody, the baby boomers, us. Who's going to protect and defend what you guys serve for, or all the way back? It's going to be the kids of the future. So by connecting these young people with veterans, hopefully the veterans will tell it straight, not pretty it up for some audience, tell it straight. This is what it is. Hopefully they'll hear the message that Captain Price gave at the commissioning down at ASU, which was, we never go to war, we never seek war. But sometimes you have to stand up and do that. And I want kids to hear all those messages so that if that is their calling, that their eyes are wide open. At a very minimum, they should be appreciating the fact that they have a pretty decent life in this country, thanks to all those who came before them, who have served. So that is our mission. It's a win-win. The students win because they learn history, they get stories about their past, and maybe think about what they want to do in the future.
So it's an oral
Learn
history.
to serve.
It's an oral history.
It's oral history. Learn to serve. Learn to be respectful of others who have worked very hard for them. The veterans win because I believe not only is their story preserved, but I think it helps them deal with a lot of their own memories.
Mhm.
Even the World War II guys, somebody actually asked, somebody cared. Even guys in their 90s feel like, wow, finally somebody asked. I mean,
And that's the name of the book, Since You Asked.
since you
right.
asked.
And so you've connected these young scholars with veterans for the veterans to tell their stories, and it's captured on a DVD camera tape, and then that's archived. But then the students take it a step further.
Yes, it's sent to the Veterans History Project. They're approaching 100,000
The
stories preserved
Library
at the Library of Congress.
Mhm.
The students also need not just to go listen for an hour and then that's the end of it. So they take that narrative and put it in story form, and we publish a book every year of the veterans we've interviewed that year. And then they interact with all the veterans at a reception in the spring, which, seeing that they are a part of something much larger is very special to them. And seeing the veterans gathered at tables and signing books is very healing.
No, it's special.
Veterans need to heal. I watched Joe yesterday or Monday at Memorial Day, and I've followed Joe's story. And I think Joe has come a long way towards dealing with his own memories. David, the same. I find this to be very, very common
Mhm.
for the veterans. I see the students developing, connections to these veterans that goes beyond just that story that time.
Sure.
They call them up, they wish them happy birthday. You have a lot of people sitting kind of alone out there.
Well, we're going to hear from Alec and Ashley. They're going to be on in June. Two of your students who have gone on to UCLA and the Barrett Honors College at ASU, respectively. And so we're looking forward to hearing from them. But seeing the exchange and seeing the relationship between veteran and student is special. I should point out that David and I are on Barbara's board of directors, the Veterans Heritage Project. I'm in book number 6. David is in book number 10. I like the fact that there's no, when the student sees the veteran, there's instant respect. There's no nonsense going on there. And when the veteran sees the students, he sees or she sees someone they can assist or help. They invest themselves in the student and in the future and what they think. They're working that, and there's a wonderful relationship that evolves. That's priceless, quite frankly, and lasts longer than the story. I mean, some of these relationships go on. Do you have some examples of some of those wonderful relationships? I know Ashley, when she comes to town, she picks up a Marine vet. That's a great story. And seeing the chief of naval operations talk with Sam. I mean, how special is that?
And also down at the commissioning ceremony, watching Captain Price down at ASU. And the student who interviewed him is just graduating. She's going to be an ROTC at NAU.
Mm-hmm.
And she's sitting in the audience looking at her friends going, that's my veteran.
Yeah.
That's my veteran. Very proud, not just an idle audience person, but hanging on every word that she's hearing. And it's going to guide her well in life. One of her veterans, and Lizzie's done more than any student, graduated last week with the senior class from Cactus Shadows because he didn't get a diploma when he came back from World War II. So he stood up on stage with standing ovation of all the graduates, all the guests, thanking this World War II veteran for his service and presenting him an honorary diploma. It doesn't get any better than that.
No, it doesn't.
Because these kids are going to go on to whatever they're going to go on to. But I think they sometimes take their education for granted, that diploma they got.
Mm-hmm.
And here's somebody who's 92 years old getting a diploma. And it meant so much to him. And the one from last year wore to our reception his medal from Cactus Shadows that had graduation. And he said, I have a lot of medals, but this is my most special medal of all.
No kidding.
Because it came from the young people.
Wow.
Who thanked him in that way for his service. So those things choke you up. And to have students walking along in front of this veteran last week and coming up and shaking his hand and thanking him. So at the end, I have to end with the funny one before the break, when the students throw their hats up, their caps up in the air. One, I don't know if it hit me or hit Ralph, but it was right there in my lap. So I took it and put it on his head, or on the top of his World War II baseball cap.
Mm-hmm.
We put like the graduation cap, and it's a wonderful picture. It's absolutely beautiful.
By the way, you can see these pictures on the Veterans Heritage Project Facebook.
Yes.
How would we access that?
Go to Facebook and put in Veterans Heritage Project. It should take you there. And you can see a lot of our other events there as well.
Right.
A lot of the reception pictures.
So Barbara started this 11 years ago. She started in one school, and this year we did 23 schools. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how that happened and the hard work that goes into it, and the people that she surrounded herself or surrounded themselves with her to make all this happen. But we'll be back. We'll take a short break, and you're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour. Stay tuned.
Everyone's going to need an attorney at some point in their life. I'm no different. Hey everyone, it's James from Vets On. Whether it was my last will and testament before deployment or my ongoing custody battle for my children during my divorce, I needed help, so I lawyered up. If you need help, I urge you to contact Capstrom Law Firm. Capstrom Law Firm in Springfield, Missouri services clients throughout the state in criminal law, personal injury, and family law. With over 13 years practicing law, Tom Capstrom understands both law and court procedures and how stressful they can be. Let Tom Capstrom Law Firm and his dedicated staff take the stress and worry out of a difficult situation by calling him today. We feel so strong about the work that Tom and his staff are doing that he'll be a monthly guest on the show. Tom is a veteran and a listener, for God's sake, so you know the guy is solid and will fight for you. Give Tom a call today by calling 417-864-0552. or email Tom at capstromlaw.com. And don't forget to tell him that Vets On sent you.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertising.
If you or someone you know is looking for a new job or career, you need to visit the pros. National Career Fairs at ncfairs.com. National Career Fairs hosts over 300 career fairs a year nationwide. The events are free and give you the perfect chance to meet some of the top employers in your area face-to-face. To find the nearest career fair to you, visit ncfairs.com. Again, that's ncfairs.com. What are you waiting for?
Veterans served us, now it's time we serve them. As a veteran of Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as a current military member deployed abroad, I would like to take a minute of your time to tell you about Patriot Hills of New York. Patriot Hills of New York is a nonprofit organization providing support to veterans and their families. They partner veterans in need with over 65 health and wellness organizations, community groups, as well as philanthropic foundations providing no or low-cost services. They've helped over 400 veterans through confidential referral services, assistance with veterans issues, employment placement, as well as educational opportunities. If you need assistance or just want to help veterans by donating your time or services, contact them at info@patriothills.org. Again, that's info@patriothills.org. Visit patriothillsofnewyork.com for more information about their services or how you can donate. Our veterans deserve no less. We can give it to them, and you can help.
You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on the Vets on Media Network.
Hey, you're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour, and we're here with Barbara Hatch and my spooked out buddy,
David Lucero.
David Lucero.
Here we go. Let me do. There we go. I'm ready now.
Oh,
All
man.
right.
So-
now you can say anything.
Oh, he's a special forces guy. These guys are,
I'll never repeat it.
yeah. Barbara, tell us about, we just had 3 receptions this year. At the end of the year, the students gather for a book signing ceremony where the veterans in this year's books are seated at a table and they autograph their story in the book, and their families are there. The students' families are there, and it is it's a tear-jerking event. Every year that I go, and every one I go to was very emotional for me. And it must be for you after seeing so many of them, Barbara. It never wears thin.
Well, what's good is that every reception takes on its own face.
Sure.
And it depends on the veterans you've interviewed and also the people that support it. So we had Arizona Humanities this year, and they wanted to see a little more interaction of the student with the veteran. So you want some variety. So we interviewed the former CNO of the Navy, Admiral Vern Clark.
Chief of Naval Operations for the Navy, and he was the Chief of Naval Operations on 9/11.
So that was an amazing interview. And what was so amazing is that the student I took, who was salutatorian, Sam Slack, not necessarily the most humble kid on the planet, very confident. And I say that with a great deal of love, because life has a way of teaching you a little more humility. But a great kid, taught his older sister who just graduated from St. Olaf, who was also in our program, wonderful young woman. So what we had them do is to sit on stage and to explain, and I moderated it, and just sort of tell each other what the interview meant to them. And Admiral Clark spoke about young people and how powerful they can be, and all the things he looked at Sam and he said, if the future is anything like you, America's in good hands. And that is the first time I've seen this young man speechless, ever. Sam, yes. And he was moved. He was visibly moved by that. And I think what he got out of the interview with Admiral Clark is, first of all, Admiral Clark loves young people. He surrounded himself with young people for his transition team because he said, we need fresh ideas. We need to listen to young people who have fresh ideas. But his unbelievable humility of what he accomplished in the Navy is something that I want young people to hear. Have the confidence, believe in what you believe, but have the humility to ask other people for their input.
One of the things that struck me during that interview process, and this is coming from the Chief of Naval Operation, a guy who's got, thousands of people under him and high visibility, and reports directly to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who reports directly to the president. So, I mean, these are the kind of people, this is kind of the stratosphere. And Vern Clark had indicated that he had been interviewed by hundreds of people from around the world, from all kinds of countries and all kinds of situations, hundreds of them. And he said that the interview that he undertook with Sam was the best one he's ever had. I mean,
right, and Sam captured the feelings. Sam captured the feeling. No one else did. And Sam somehow managed to capture the emotions of the feelings in all of the things that it wasn't just a story. There was some
when
emotion
you're
to
interviewed by news media and on you know, it's a whole different deal. They come with their preset questions and their whole agenda. Whereas young people are sitting there saying, tell me your story.
Yeah.
And I think what stood out for Sam was how Vern never intended to be in the service. It was like one door after the other opened up. And no matter when he was on a ship, basically doing very low level work, his father had always told him, do whatever you do 1,000%. And so he just worked extremely hard at whatever job he was given. So he got noticed, and then another door opened. He says, well, okay. So he went and did that. And he said about 20 years in, somebody goes, oh, your career. He goes, no, I'm not. I'm not a Navy guy. He goes, well, I guess I am.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like me in teaching. I never intended it to be a career. It just happened. And I think that young people understand that whatever you do, and you're going to get some jobs maybe, do it to the best of your ability. He is the only, I think, non-Naval Academy graduate that's ever been CNO of the Navy. He never thought he'd even be considered. So I want young people to hear that work hard part. Dr. Mariano, who was Bill Clinton's White House doctor, she said that was the best interview she'd ever had with a young person.
She was a Navy
She was a Navy
doctor.
A Navy doctor. Her father was Filipino, and highest he could ever aspire was steward.
Yeah.
And she ended up becoming an admiral, when she was at the White House. And so for a young person, I mean, the message is very clear. They didn't start out wearing all these bars on their shoulders and all these medals. They simply saw an opportunity and they went with it.
The fascinating thing to me is, then we always ask, where did you start off from? Because people are not born with stars on their shoulders. And we had General Fridovich on here. He went to, from Florida, went to Knox College and, got in and loved it and aspired and worked his way up. And all these people start off somewhere, never thinking, I had a vision of being a pilot. They start off so humbly. The Duke, Carl Schneider.
And Rich Carmona.
And Rich Carmona
who was the keynote speaker at last spring's event. And here was a high school dropout. He was born in poverty in
Harlem, in New York City.
Spanish Harlem.
Yeah.
And joined the Army. And it was off to the races after that. So it was just work hard and.
Well, he's he became a medic in the special forces like you did, and that's how we got Dr. Carmona, because he's a special forces guy like David, and he was a medic like David, and his skill sets worked up, and he went to
UC San Francisco Med School
on the Army, and they paid his way into becoming a doctor, and he became the Surgeon General. But he was also a SWAT team guy in between.
Yeah. So I mean, all these. Again, it's just one accomplishment after another, but always focusing on the mission or the task at hand and how they can best do it.
Well, as a teacher, and you look at, I've been to several graduations this past week. Look at these young people. How do you compete for those jobs?
Wow. And
I think to have this message from the Dr. Carmonas and the Dr. Marianos about doing the best you can, working hard. The medals will come, but that's not what you aspire to. You just do a good job, and somebody will eventually notice. It's a good message for them to get. Nobody's going to hand it to you. You have to work for it.
I liked Dr. Carmona when he said, when I was in the service, no one asked us if we were Republicans or Democrats. Getting shot at. I mean, it seems, we all laugh when we say it now, but we've divided ourselves somehow as a country. And Rich Carmona said, when I talk to policymakers, some of these people don't understand the people who are in charge of sending people away to these war situations, that they don't get it somehow, that these are not Republicans. These are American kids that we're sending out there.
Well, and I want to say something else about, we don't just interview generals and admirals.
Yeah.
I don't care if you never got higher than a private or, lowest of the low. And I heard about a lot of not court martials, but people getting busted for rank. They're pretty funny. Like the guy that was interviewed by Tucson. He was on the Indianapolis.
Oh, what a great story.
When the Indianapolis was sunk,
and
these guys are floating in the water, and he's hearing the people screaming because the sharks are after them. And he makes it. But this kid grew up a poor kid, poor Hispanic kid.
From Aho or Y or Florence maybe?
from Florence. And so here he gets fished out, and, after days, and they put him on the ship, and then they start making him do all this manual labor on the ship, and the guy's worn out, and he says, well, why, you're not making any of these other guys do it, why me? So he thought it was maybe because he was of Mexican background.
Yeah.
And then he refused. So when he got to San Diego, they threw him in the brig for a week. I mean, unbelievable stories, but
He floated in the ocean. They wouldn't let him in the boat because there was a few boats. Maybe they didn't let him in the boat because
They
he
were
was Mexican.
full.
They were full.
yeah.
And so he bobbed around like everyone. The Indianapolis was that famous ship, right, that got sunk. It delivered the bomb to Tinian. Was it Tinian or Okinawa or wherever?
No, Tinian.
And then on the way back, it was top secret, and the ship disappeared. No one knew it was a top secret mission, and it went missing after it got torpedoed. No one knew it was missing, and so no one came for the survivors for days. And these people were being eaten by sharks in the water. This fellow survives, and they put him on the work detail because he's Mexican, and he complains about it. And he finally comes back home. He says, "Enough of this for me," and he goes back to Florence. And he was only 17 when he went in. And he had survived all of this, goes back and gets on this basketball team in high school, and they won the championship. He's got a picture of his championship basketball team. But the most wonderful thing that happened, Don Dickinson said about this guy, he was bitter forever about that whole experience of his. And now he's 94. And it's only in the last 2 years, after having met Don, after having told his story, after having got it all out, that he's come to peace with it.
We asked him to be in the Veterans Day Parade in Phoenix, and Sanderson Lincoln donated cars. So we asked him to be the World War II veteran, and we asked, Don, one of our Tucson school there, to come up, and that was the start of it. And then the reception down in Tucson in May, where he got to sit and sign books for all these people and all these students, just honoring him. He's the happiest guy around.
He was a wonderful
Took
guy.
a long time.
Yeah, it did. And I said, thank God he stayed alive this long so he could have a life free of those emotions and enjoy the time he has remaining.
And
it was priceless.
Unfortunately, that's not true of some of our other veterans.
No.
Exactly.
Medgar Evers was a World War II veteran.
Was he really?
And murdered for his civil rights activity in the 60s.
Wow.
So some people don't make it. Those kind of stories are, I think, obviously just as important as those who survived and thrived.
Well, we had the occasion this past week, and it shows you this connection, to interview a 100, well, he thinks he's 100-year-old Native American veteran whose brother was code talker. And my students were still in school, so we got a boy back from college. He was back for a few weeks before he goes off for summer from Chaparral High School. So Michael said, I'm free. So we went out and we interviewed Sam Little. And we said, well, how come you don't know how old you are? And he said, well, they came out in the 20s. His uncle was in the First World War. He remembers his uncle coming back. So that had to be, 1918? And Sam must have been maybe about 3, but he remembers him coming back on horseback up at Cal Springs up near Tuba City. So he remembers that. So he must have been born maybe 1915, somewhere in there. But in the 1920s, the census people came out to start counting actually the Native Americans, and they asked the mother with the translator, what's your name? So she gave him the Navajo name. And the translator said, well, that translates to one little man. So the census guy said, okay, your name is Little, and you're Sam, and you're Florence, and you're, just gave them all names. And his birth date on his driver's license is simply December 31st, 1920, I think, because they don't know. They had no idea, so they just gave them all names. And so to get those stories, which to me represent a bigger cross-section of who our veterans are, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, to me is a gift to my students to be able to hear these stories of all the Americans who have served. and
No.
don't get the recognition always that they deserve.
You know, when we were David and I, and you were at the Kiwanis lunch in Cave Creek, and there was a Marine pilot there, and you knew him, and he was a beautiful guy, and he fought in World War II. He was a flying sergeant, and Joe Foss, the Medal of Honor winner, called him the kid, right?
Yeah.
So he was signed and lied to get in the service. He was 16 or 17, right? But the job he had, his father was a pilot delivering the airmail. So this kid would be in the plane with him, like at 10 years old, flying, you know, the mail, low level flying. So this
Nap
kid,
of the earth.
a nap of the earth flying. This kid at 10. So when he got in the Marine Corps, this kid was a low level guy. He could fly low level. And so they're on Guadalcanal and they're trying to knock out pillboxes and things. And someone says, and he hears someone saying to Joe Foss, hey, listen, he says, the thing you got to do, Joe, is you got to get one of your guys who's great at flying low level. He says, I got him, the kid, right? This kid. He says, yeah. And he says, I'd go in and hammer the pillboxes where these guys were coming in high to drop. And his name was the kid. And here he is, 92 or 3. And he and Joe Foss had this relationship, and they remained. One of the reasons he said that Joe Foss moved out here is because, he was here. And they had retained this friendship forever. So that was pretty exciting, how humble he was and how wonderful he performed in the Marine Corps, and after. He was just a delightful human being.
A lot of stuff in the space program.
Yeah, he got into the space program, and that's where he spent his. He wanted to only talk about the space program to your student, right? Is that right?
He wrote his own part about World War II because he said he couldn't tell it.
Yeah.
He had some great stories the other day, though.
Oh gosh.
You got to wait
After
till they
lunch,
get a
it was-
little older.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about David and I is that, we can tell those stories because we've been in the arena. At least David has actually been in the hard parts, but we have an appreciation for them. And we can tell these stories to one another. Necessarily, they might not share them to everyone, but gosh, we're privy to so many great stories.
And the humor gets a little dark on occasion.
It's a little dark, but that's the way
Hey,
it should
I'm
be.
in. I'm in.
Yeah, little gallows humor there.
Kids are in too, by the way.
Oh,
But it's a fascinating thing to hear these stories, and I'll pick up when we come back. But sitting around the table there at Fountain Hills, we had Phil Yin, right, who starts off in China. Then his dad is the consul general to Russia from Chiang Kai-shek's government, and he lives in Kazakhstan, in Almaty, Kazakhstan. And then he gets to the United States, and they have a chicken farm in Jersey. So he has a Jersey accent, speaking Chinese and Russian with a with a Jersey accent. And joins the Marine Corps, and he is
Ends up in Vietnam.
and ends up in Vietnam on Hill 51, and gets hammered, gets riddled with shrapnel. Has a degree in physics from Villanova, gets a PhD from Brooklyn Poly, and
Was on NASDAQ.
you
it
just
was
can't.
NASDAQ.
You
I mean,
can't make this stuff.
you
up.
can't make it. And then the guy next to him, Clovis Jones, right, who was a student nonviolent committee member, met Martin Luther King, and he was involved in those issues in Georgia. He was on the show, but then he goes in, gets in airborne infantry. He's in the Battle of Adrang Valley. The first tour goes out, pre-med into Morehouse. They said, you still want to fly, which was his dream. Sent him back to Vietnam as a gunship, Cobra gunship pilot, where he flew with a friend of mine. And here he is, flew with FedEx for 26 years, has a wonderful life, but paid a price for it. Then in the other guy, there was a guy from Ukraine who was working with your guys. He worked for the 5th Special Forces Group in Vietnam, and his job was to track down his counterparts. He was looking for Russian advisors that were advising the North Vietnamese, and he says they found a lot of Bulgarians and Kazakhs and other people. Right?
I found one.
Yeah, the first I told him about yours. I told him I think the first person that David shot in Vietnam happened to be a 6'2" Russian Spetsnaz guy. And here I am in Kazakhstan later on meeting these people who served in Vietnam, and we were all Vietnam veterans at the same party. So it's I guess that speaks also to the brotherhood of veterans around the world. When veterans meet other veterans, we have a little gallows humor going. Listen, we're going to take a short break here. We're listening to Barbara Hatch, who, by the way, started off in the Peace Corps and worked around the world a little bit. And she has some interesting insights from her experience there, and brought all that experience and love of education here to Arizona, and we're so happy that she's here. Stay tuned.
Veterans served us. Now it's time we serve them. As a veteran of Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as a current military member deployed abroad, I would like to take a minute of your time to tell you about Patriot Hills of New York. Patriot Hills of New York is a nonprofit organization providing support to veterans and their families. They partner veterans in need with over 65 health and wellness organizations, community groups, as well as philanthropic foundations providing no or low-cost services. They've helped over 400 veterans through confidential referral services, assistance with veterans issues, employment placement, as well as educational opportunities. If you need assistance or just want to help veterans by donating your time or services, contact them at info@patriothills.org. Again, that's info@patriothills.org. Visit patriothillsofnewyork.com for more information about their services or how you can donate. Our veterans deserve no less. We can give it to them, and you can help. Everyone's going to need an attorney at some point in their life. I'm no different. Hey, everyone, it's James from Vets On. Whether it was my last will and testament before deployment or my ongoing custody battle for my children during my divorce, I needed help, so I lawyered up. If you need help, I urge you to contact Capstrom Law Firm. Capstrom Law Firm in Springfield, Missouri services clients throughout the state in criminal law, personal injury, and family law. With over 13 years practicing law, Tom Capstrom understands both law and court procedures and how stressful they can be. Let Tom Capstrom Law Firm and his dedicated staff take the stress and worry out of a difficult situation by calling him today. We feel so strong about the work that Tom and his staff are doing that he'll be a monthly guest on the show. Tom is a veteran and a listener, for God's sake, so you know the guy is solid and will fight for you. Give Tom a call today by calling 417-864-0552. or email Tom at capstromlaw.com. And don't forget to tell him that Vets On sent you.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertising.
If you or someone you know is looking for a new job or career, you need to visit the pros. National Career Fairs at ncfairs.com. National Career Fairs hosts over 300 career fairs a year nationwide. The events are free and give you the perfect chance to meet some of the top employers in your area face-to-face. To find the nearest career fair to you, visit ncfairs.com. Again, that's ncfairs.com. What are you waiting for?
You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on the Vets On Media Network.
Hi, we're back. This is Joe Brett with my pal David Lucer, the contractor extraordinaire from Soldier of Fortune magazine.
It's time for.
At least the pictures say that.
At least the pictures say
Here we
that.
go. I got to
He's
get
got
in.
the sunglasses
Got to get
on
into
there.
character. Here we go. There.
Spook City, man. Here we are. We're in the Ville with the spooks. And we're with Barbara Hatch, of course, and Barbara Hatch was the founder of the Veterans Heritage Project. And we're just talking about the wonderful stories and the wonderful people that we've met, men and women. And what 1% of your we've interviewed the program has interviewed the 1,000th veteran here in Arizona this year, and about 900 students have run through your program. Is that correct?
That's true.
And about 1% of them joined the military.
Well, you always have mixed things. I mean, kids hear all these military stories. I just want to make sure that they're not envisioning Napoleon on a white horse or George Washington all cleaned up crossing the Delaware, but that I was telling Joe and David before we started that it's real important that veterans tell the kids the truth. Just tell them the way it is. This is the good stuff. This is the bad stuff. Here are your risks. Here are your rewards. They'll make it up. They'll decide for themselves anyway. And so we have 4 girls. Hello, girls out there. A lot of women going in the service these days. One at the Naval Academy, one at the Air Force Academy, Merchant Marines, and Coast Guard. I think Coast Guard got demoted. It's no longer a military. I don't know. Stuff.
The smartest kids go to the Coast Guard Academy.
Yeah, well,
because
it's a calling.
Well, you have to. There's no congressional thing. You have to get in there on your merit. I know when I was in grad school, the people who blew everybody out were Coast Guard people, right? Because that was.
Well, as I advised also my nephew, because he was thinking about doing service because he wanted to fly. He says, well, what do you think, Uncle David? I mean, should I go, for the Navy or the Marine Corps or the Air Force? And I said, no. Go to the Coast Guard. Why is that? Well, because you can outgun everybody who you meet.
The Coast Guard?
Coast Guard outguns everybody they come across.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Well, I think the respect I have for them is that they have to patrol our coastline, and we all know big coastline, and there are a lot of threats.
Yeah.
So they're going to be the featured group next year when we dedicate our
Coast Guard.
books, the Coast Guard.
We're going to have shirts, of course. Barbara gets a new shirt every year. For we honor them each year. That this year's the Air Force. Last year was the Army. Anyway, every year we dedicate the book to a new branch of the service.
But I think it's important that young people have options to do this, but that they go in with their eyes wide open and not be sucked in by the perceived glamour of it all. But I think with all the news that comes out today, they're not.
Right.
And they find their calling. They find their place. I think the biggest message I want them to get is important to serve. Doesn't matter what capacity you serve. I went in the Peace Corps.
Mhm.
So maybe that's their way. Just go out and do your job and look around and open your eyes and you see an older person crossing the street, offer a hand. Just being aware of America and grateful for what they have so that they can mind this country when we're all gone. I mean, that's what you guys fought
Well, I
for.
think, yes, but I think in the military, there's a lot of humility. I mean, everybody is a private or everybody was a second lieutenant who becomes an officer. And so, I mean, those are difficult ranks. I mean, you have to eat a lot of crow. And that's, and that's how you learn, just by
But if you cook it right, it tastes just like chicken.
well, everything tastes like chicken to you, man.
You probably ate some of that that stuff over in the Philippines, that balut stuff.
Right,
Oh,
whatever.
Lord. I've heard that. Did you ever eat that day you were in the Philippines?
No.
Snakes and
Snake
chicken.
eaters.
Everything eats
Yeah.
like chicken. So there's a responsibility about us when we're working with kids and young students, and that we not glamorize this and be a recruiting tool, to say this is the way to go. And I remember Andrew Basovich, I'll never forget him. He was striking when he spoke at ASU. When asked him, young ROTC cadets say, what do you think for us? Do you think we should serve in the military? And he's critical of the military these days. Someone was saying, well, it's a chicken hawk nation and there's some issues. But he said, and he cautioned the ROTC, and I was with there was a bunch of ROTC cadets there. He says, well, if you absolutely must go in the military, then by all means do it. But my God, you have a life ahead of you. Think about your whole life. You only get one shot at this. Make sure this is what you want to do. But if not, there's other things that you can do with your life that are extraordinary, that are giving, that are challenging, that are rewarding. And he was very adamant about that. Almost had tears in his eyes, I think, because his son was killed in Iraq or Afghanistan, I think. And Andrew was a West Point graduate, of course, and a very, very scholarly, well-spoken guy that hopefully we'll have on this show sometime. But wasn't that an extraordinary day?
Yes.
That was quite touching.
So you want to counsel students to, choose what's best for you.
Sure.
And I must have done a good job because they seem to do that.
Yeah.
One's a doctor. You've got lawyers. You've got teachers. You've got just about a little bit of everything.
Well, what seems to be common amongst them is a dream, a vision as to what they want to do and where they want to go.
The other constant is their respect for service people.
Mhm.
One boy was driving cross country and he was at a rest area and he saw a veteran sitting outside that looked upset. And I think it was a Vietnam veteran. And he went outside and he sat and spoke with him for half an hour. What kid does that?
Wow.
What college kid does that? And it just because there's an awareness for them of people in the service, and they will come up to them and they will thank them. And veterans know it's sincere. Some veterans think you're just giving them a line of BS, but they know from these kids it's sincere, and they'll look them straight in the eye.
I remember when we went down to, I went with Ashley and Sophia, two of your students, leaders last year, the year before. And Sophia's now at ASU, and so is Ashley, right? She's in the Baird Honors College. But they took their books with them that they had written. We went to the Cronkite School, and there they were talking to the dean about, there's the article I wrote when I was in 9th grade. This is the article I wrote when I was a senior. And they were sharing their writing with people who teach journalism at the Cronkite School. I mean, it was extraordinary. And they spoke professionally, and they spoke honestly and openly, and they had a dialogue with fellow writers. And these were high school students talking with newspaper reporters and people of status in the industry. And they had a conversation about it. And I was very impressed looking in on that. And the kids, your students, spoke well, and they spoke confidently, and they're both doing well now, as partially as a result of being in the program, in the project. What has Ashley got a nice job out of that too?
She has an internship for the New York Times down at ASU. She
Wow.
has some other things going for this summer. I can't keep up with them.
Well, we're going to find out. She'll be on the show in 2 or 3
Yeah,
weeks.
you
Moving
can
at the
ask
speed
her.
of light.
Yeah. And there was also Sophia had an interesting story. She came from Argentina and didn't really like the United States that much until she got involved in this in the project. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, she felt lost. I mean, she's out of her culture. She's out of her comfort zone. She steps into a high school where friendships formed years before she was ever part of the equation. So she hung around me a lot because I'm very well traveled and very international. And she joined the project. And through the project and the people that she met, she found a family. She found a comfortable place to be. And she has just absolutely blossomed. And she said she finally learned what it meant to be an American. I think what amazed her the most was meeting veterans and their level of patriotism and respect for the country.
Sure.
It moved her. She said, I didn't get it until then. And that's when she finally got
I
it.
think when the kids are interviewing, the students are interviewing a veteran, they see emotion or tears, or that's an honest story. There's no.
Well, they come from countries that have dictatorships.
Yeah.
People are afraid to show any kind of loyalty, and loyalty to whom?
Yeah.
I mean, I met 2 of my students yesterday. One was born in South Africa. She was our president
Michelle.
this past,
Yeah.
Michelle Hugo. She's headed off to Cambodia for 2.5 weeks to stop human trafficking, not personally to do this,
Sure.
but to work with that, which
Wow.
is her passion.
Mhm.
So she will serve in that capacity. The other one was off to Oman for 6 weeks as part of that State Department program to learn Arabic. And I said, you're not going to wear what you're wearing today here in Arizona. She goes, oh, no.
Oh.
So the awareness
Who
of
was
the
that? Who was that? Who was going?
to Oman,
Yeah.
Brittany Stallings.
Oh, yeah.
And Sam and another student last year went to China to study. So
I
they
worked
need
with
to.
Sam. I took Sam to the Phoenix sister city that had a sister city in Chengdu, where Sam wound up.
So I think for me, the future of warfare is there shouldn't be any.
Yeah.
And so if we can learn other languages and young people around the globe and tell them this is not the way. I mean, we should be getting better at everything we're doing in life. And these young kids going out there studying languages, volunteering. Carolina, Nick goes down to Costa Rica and volunteers medically
Mhm.
to help people. This is the way. This is the future of warfare. In my opinion, is no warfare.
I do too. And we have a sister city in Marrakesh, Morocco. And I hope some of those students that came over here, best student city exchange I've ever worked with, but those Islamic girls and guys, the students were terrific here. You couldn't tell who was the American and who was from Morocco. Very intellectual, very heady. And I often, we have a group going back over who will be staying in their homes, etc. And the students tell me that after about a half hour, they get all the stereotypical thoughts out. Well, we thought you were this, we thought you were that, we thought you did this, we thought you did that. And once all that's out of the way, they're students. And they're, 17, 18, 19 years old.
Young
students.
scholars.
Oh, yes, young Scott. You got to earn that scholar designation.
You got to do that scholar thing. But anyway, they're off and running as citizens of the world. And I think, and these young people are citizens of the world because they've traveled.
And might not be quite so apt to try and kill each other.
I think that's a good point,
That's a point.
Well, a couple of the girl who's at the Air Force Academy now went with me to Vietnam. So they're not naive.
Yeah.
They're not silly about the evil that's in the world. They
Yeah.
get that, and they're
Yeah.
willing to take that on too. But
Well,
they're
that's
doing the other things at the
but
same
that's the
time.
better. I mean, when you have that type of a soldier, that time of a career professional, who knows the good side and the dark side, who's not in for some ideological crackpot idea of what it means, to serve, the reality of service. Jim Kelsey and some of his guys, I mean, there's a wonderful reality. Those guys got into the intelligence, of course. What a wonderful human being he is. But it's remarkable. I can't thank you enough, Barbara, for being here today. We missed the call in from our friend who was going to be in Kurdistan, actually, but we understand why he couldn't make it. And next week, we will have a surprise guest for you. We are working on that now because we want to make sure that people who come on the show are not going to be compromised in any way by airing their concerns on the internet. So thank you. We'll see you next week. David, any parting shots?
I just look forward to next week and thank Barbara so much for all that you've done as far as the Veterans Heritage Project, helping us here at the Veterans Heritage Hour, and helping the kids and fostering the idea of service to the community.
This is Dave Bray, by the way. Some of you like this music taking us out. And this is Dave Bray, who was in the military. He was a Navy corpsman. Is that right, Adam? And Adam got this tape specifically for this show and got permission to use it. What's the name of the band, David?
Madison Rising.
Madison Rising is the name of the band.
Stay
Enjoy.
strong. Stay strong.
Stay strong, America.
So proudly we